This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing okay. You know, the post-Thanksgiving zone in between this fucking Christmas zone. I don't know. It's just interesting stories, interesting times.
You like to celebrate those holidays and you know it.
I mean, I like fucking having a good time, but I mean, I don't know. Christmas is not really my favorite, but that's a different point.
I'm very impressed with what just went down in Brussels with the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has condemned MEP Joseph Caesar with unacceptable and indefensible behavior after he was caught breaking lockdown rules at a male orgy in Brussels. Now, Caesar, I think you say it's Caesar. So it sounds like seizure.
Those Hungarian names are always
seizure.
Tough. Yeah.
A 59-year-old married father of one and a founding member of Hungary's right-wing Fidesz party was caught on Friday attending a sex party before shimmying down a drain pipe in a failed escape attempt. He tried to claim diplomatic immunity and was given a police caution before resigning from Orban's anti-LGBT party after media in Brussels reported that the social conservative had attended a 25-person male orgy.
Was Lindsey Graham there?
Yeah. You know, it's one of those things where
he's crying because he wasn't.
Well, you know, what's worse, the hypocrisy of the assholes that try to push legislation that basically goes against things like freedom of sex or sexual preference? What's worse, them or their fucking followers that will always look the other way, who actually in huge numbers, including, basically the American Republicans at this point. I mean, they always look the other way, and after they force their dumb ideas of like family values and just tradition.
Look, this idiot even describes his anti-migrant, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBT stance as illiberal democracy. While his critics, of course, accuse him of cracking down on civil liberties and suppressing the independence of Hungary's press. I mean, what's happening here in this country now?
Well, you know, it's funny because, you know, Simon's old boss, Joe Ricketts, I mean, you see it in Manhattan all the time. And people always, they talk about the elites. Manhattan, well, Brussels being the capital of the EU now, is this kind of similar, or DC. You have these people that they're from these areas where they prey on people's fears. They try to push through all this xenophobic or homophobic. They push all these things through, but they love the conveniences and the luxuries of cosmopolitan, tolerant places like New York City, Brussels, wherever it is, Berlin.
Well, look, anyway, it's just a ruse to hide their own depravity. I mean, and this is exactly what, coming back to the Marquis de Sade, it's exactly what he was illustrating in his books, Smuggled Out of Prison, 17 Years Within, when he was talking about how, you know, the upper echelon of society, the rich, will try to get away with everything while condemning everybody else.
Yeah.
Inequality, especially financial, is more outlandish than ever. So therefore, I can't really blame a man dubbed the Too Tall Bandit. The FBI is now hunting him. He's thought to have been responsible for 10 bank robberies in Tennessee, 5 in North Carolina, 1 in South Carolina, from 2009 till now. Now, his height is assumed to be between 6'3" and 6'8", and he's been known to wear terrifying masks, carry a black handgun. He's also known to be a white man aged about 40 years old who weighs between 210 and 250 pounds. Well, that can't be Thurston Moore, because although he might be almost 6'8", he weighs about 110 pounds. I'm just saying.
Kind of hard to hide. I mean,
that's a pretty. I mean, really, it's not like looking for a red Ford pickup truck.
Well, speaking of trying to hide, facial recognition is now being adopted by the animal community, and basically. Melanie Clapham, she's a bear biologist up in Canada, and bears, you know, particularly grizzlies, they span quite a large area. They roam and they travel, and they're all over the place. So it's getting her job, you know, it's difficult to keep track of bears, even if they would tag them. But she's like, you know what? All this facial recognition technology, why don't we adopt it for my bear research? Now, they've already taken photographs of something like 4,674 bears, and they've already been able with the technology to kind of like, hey, that's I don't know, furry or whatever the fucking thing's name is. Yeah, exactly. 100. They've done that with 132. But this is they say it's going to be used in the future of lost pets and all that stuff. So facial recognition will apply to anything with a face. It turns out that's where it's all going.
What's wrong with a simple chip? Oh yeah, you've been fucking chipped is what's wrong with a fucking chip. Now, speaking of people with one nut loose or maybe two nuts that are too fucking big for his own diaper, Trump's recent approval of hanging and firing squads was pushed through by doughboy and bootlicker William Barr. Now, once this approved amendment is published in the Federal Register, which is the Justice Department official, it said could come as early as 30 days. Well, you know what's going to happen? It's not going to happen because, first of all, I'd like to give Trump a 6-gun salute. And ultimately, Joe Biden he's campaigned against the death penalty, even though it was Clinton, 3 strikes you're out, signed it into law.
Well, it's kind of funny because, you know, I was telling you, I like to read the almanac when I'm sitting around. And so capital punishment, there's all types of ways of killing people, injection, blah, blah, blah. Funny that Joe Biden, he's from Delaware. That's the only state where they can still do hanging as your execution. And there was a guy, I think it wasn't that long ago, like in the 80s or something, where he's like, because you could pick how you were going to die. And he's like, I want to be hung. So Delaware still allows hanging.
I'm just wondering if Diaper Don, as he's now been called, that would be the so-called idiotic ass clown that's been sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue for 4 years. He was actually called Diaper Don by a professional wrestler, Dave Bautista, who claimed that Trump wore a diaper under his suit at WrestleMania. Yeah.
Well, I believe it.
But then again, supposedly some wrestlers, including Steve Austin, have been known to wear a diaper under their trunk because sometimes they do shit their pants.
Oh, well, I mean, the word is...
last hanging was 1994.
1994. So
and actually, New Hampshire and Washington State are also states that you can still be hung.
Okay, you can still do it, but that was the last time it happened. Well, speaking of acrobats...
Well, I'm not done yet with Diaper Don.
Please.
I wonder if he's shitting his pants now, which is why he's trying to send out pardons for his Stepford daughter and dumbass sons, as well as the worst lawyer ever in the world. Somebody that actually shits from their head. Yes. Rudolph Giuliani was shitting from his fucking head, if you ask me. And look, and ass clown Diaper Don may try to pardon for federal crimes committed or not, but that's not going to save their ass from the Southern District of New York, who's got the subpoenas ready. I like what Jimmy Kimmel said. They called Trump Uncle Scam, and after all, he has just bilked his MAGA Billy supporters for something like $150 million, as well as him and the son-in-law, the Stepford son-in-law, pocketed reportedly $3.6 million, which was supposed to go out in PPP loans. Well, they won't sign a relief or Mitch the bitch Connell. Maybe one more month of unemployment checks for people. Well, I'm just going to finish with this. What I love is that, and then you can take it over. What I love is that Trump's biographer said that his buffoonery in regards to this alleged mass voter fraud, which even William Bootlicker Barr had to say there was no fucking voter fraud. Michael D'Antonio said he is profoundly incompetent. A loser, you might say. He's so incompetent, he can't even succeed at fucking losing. I'm so sick of the Trump, it is time to dump that motherfucker. Well, and Delaware River might not be a bad.
Well, speaking of dumps and pardoning, do you think when he does shit his diapers, does he go, pardon me, which is basically what he's trying to do?
Well, I doubt it because he's been shitting all over the American public for the past 4 fucking years. The guy has no shame, doesn't understand. Well, he's embarrassed now. And what is he embarrassed by? He's embarrassed because he endorsed a Georgia Republican. It's funny that all of the lawsuits he filed were kicked out of court by Republicans who he put in fucking positions.
A lot that he put in. There was I think an Olympic or professional gymnast in North Korea leaped over a 10-foot wall in the demilitarized zone to escape. And when, he didn't have any ID and when the authorities came, like, well, what's going on? And he told the story. He's like, we don't believe it. And they're like, well, you got to prove it to us. So then they had him for about an hour, like leaping over walls and stuff. And they're like, you know what? This guy is pretty insane. I think that he's telling the truth.
I wish they would throw Trump over the fucking wall he has in front of the White House and then toss him on the other side of the wall he supposedly was building across Mexico. Failed.
Oh, yeah, he failed at that. He failed at that.
He's great at failing.
Oh, well, that's one of his specialties, maybe his biggest specialty. 7-year-old Swedish woman, they won't give her name, was arrested yesterday when they took out her 41-year-old son, who had essentially been missing since he was 12, when she took him out of school and basically turned him into some feral prisoner. And it's not just like she wasn't out in the woods. She was in those suburbs of Stockholm. They're not exactly like the post-Soviet block buildings, but those kind of drab gray things that you see outside. He was there for 28 years, covered in sores, barely could walk, no teeth. And, you hear about this stuff and how?
The depravity of humans never shocks me at this point. It's just, first of all, that they breed is horrifying enough. Then they do things like this. I mean, where did the twist originate? I doubt it started with mom. I think it goes back to whatever cave they originally crawled out of. It's horrifying.
It's horrifying. Well, here's some more horrifying human stories. So,
thank you, Tim.
This one actually is looking up a little bit. The 6-year-old French boy who they are not giving the name to is finally recovering a year later after he was thrown off the observation platform at the Tate Modern in London, 10 stories. But he landed on this 5th floor slanted roof that's kind of saved him, but he, broken bones, head injuries, blah, blah, blah. And yes, some rando, well, not his rando, his name's Jonty Bravery is his name. He just picked up a 6-year-old and heaved him off of but the kid's walking again and he writes songs and he's kind of coming together. And the guy that threw him off is serving his 15-year sentence. So in advocacy,
let the punishment fit the crime. I mean, this is where I think he should have been then thrown off. I mean, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, broken bones and a fractured skull, cracked spine, should have gotten the fucking same thing.
Over the holiday, on Thanksgiving Day, Vincel Jackson, 52, was stabbed to death by James Dixon at a Thanksgiving gathering because a bunch of people were drinking. Vincel's like, stop putting your hands in the turkey, because for leftovers, everyone's just kind of wasted and everyone's like jamming their hands inside the cavities and wolfing down stuffing. And finally, he's like, you got to go. I just caught your hands in this turkey too many times. And the guy turned around, wasted, and stabbed him to death.
Did he eat his liver?
Well, no, it wasn't that bad. I could be wrong. Was Marvin Gaye killed on Thanksgiving?
I hate family dinners. I understand how they drive people to commit acts of random violence. First of all, keep your fingers out of my pie.
It was April 1st he died.
Okay. Oh, April Fool's Day. Okay. Well, you'll like this, Lydia. A new jellyfish species. I
love it, and I did see this.
Yeah, it was discovered, and it was, they didn't have a sample, but with their remote operated video there in Alpha, Puerto Rico, and they're like, what the hell is this? And so that's kind of...
come in all sizes and shapes. Jellyfish, they're everywhere. They are the original aliens. They are true aliens.
Absolutely. Also...
Tim, you mentioned jellyfish, and I have to mention Jellyfish Lake. One of my favorite places in Micronesia, thousands of non-stinging jellyfish in turquoise water that you can swim amongst. Yes, go to the Discovery Channel.
Oh, jellyfish. Yeah.
They're gorgeous.
They can be. They also can be deadly.
Well, these are friendly ones, friendly fellows. Thousands and thousands of amber-colored jellyfish. Oh, I love it.
Portuguese man of war are not jellyfish. I've been stung by those. Those are a floating colony. It's something else. But
Alex Ward could be kind of described as a man o' war musician.
yeah, well, that's one way of putting it.
He's got a few stingers up his sleeve.
maybe more than a few, but I've toured with him. He's also a friend. He's a virtuoso, a multi-instrumentalist.
Surprisingly, I was going to say virtuous as well, but he is a virtuoso. He's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve, and he's very unpredictable, in spite of the fact he likes cardigans and bushy hair.
I've toured with him with Lutenbachers. I played with him with Charles Hayward recently. We've also been on festivals where we weren't playing with each other.
I love that gig with Charles Hayward, you and Alex Ward. That was great. Let's bring on Alex Ward.
Sure.
Because he's a cheery chap. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our special guest, Alex Ward. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Alex Ward, who is, as you were saying, Tim?
A multi-talented, multi-instrumentalist, multi-dimensional human being who I've been fortunate enough to tour and play with and witness perform. I would say best known as a clarinetist and guitarist, but I guess you play other instruments as well, Alex.
Yeah, but I think best known as those is right. And I'm sort of cutting down I find it harder and harder to keep lots of different instruments going. I need to kind of practice those as much as I can to just maintain on them these days. So yeah, the doubling on lots of other stuff is, except for recording projects, which obviously now there's more happening, so I may have to dig some other things. I was actually playing bass today, but
oh, nice.
So public, yeah, clarinet now and guitar.
Oh, I see you have your pint. That's you're in your comfort zone right now.
I have my homebrew pint, which is has been very useful during lockdown. What's
Alex,
that you got there, Lydia?
which is brew. As somebody that started so young, at 8 years old, you start playing instrument. What did you come out of the womb with who gave you these genes? Are your parents musical?
Not in terms of performance, but they're both enthusiasts, and I can trace back a lot of my tastes to their record collection.
But at 8 years old, you want to play an instrument? That's so great.
I guess it's seems, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder whether it was that great, but no, I don't.
Wow. You're social with me. Were you a social child? Or were you kind of antisocial? Were you more of was an instrument a great opportunity to hide away from society? Or was it just, I love music and it was totally independent, or kind of both? What was your relationship with music at such a young age?
As an 8 to 12-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe a bit of both, although I kind of, I think I would definitely have liked to know some people who shared more of my tastes in music at that time, but that was kind of unlikely given what I was into.
Exactly. What were you into? 8 to 12, and then you're playing with Derek Bailey at 12.
At age 12. What 12-year-olds? First of all, did you know Derek Bailey when he just said, "Hey, that guy, I want him to work with me, this guy to work with me"? Or
the kind of music I was listening to answer your question, from 8 to 12, I was listening to a lot of kind of American free jazz. That was sort of, again, basically from my dad had an Ornette Coleman record. I liked it. I started researching, looking up. And then from learning more about that, I started reading about Derek sort of from his connection with American people, like, the people like Braxton, the AACM, Steve Lacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd heard a radio broadcast that he did, which later came out on the Drop Me Off at 96th CD, and enjoyed it. And then there happened to be this sort of summer course in improvised music that was going on, run by an organization which I don't think exists anymore, called Community Music. And my parents saw that was happening and saw that Derek was supposedly teaching on it. and asked me if I would like to go on it. And I said yes. And that's when I met Derek at that. Now, it should be said that Derek's appearance at that was pretty fleeting. I don't think the idea of teaching improvised music was anything like his idea of a good time or anything. But he was there for whatever reason he was there, and we hooked up from that.
I mean, a child being into free jazz. I mean, I can only project my own experience, which I just wasn't sophisticated enough at 8 to 12 to even grasp what that could possibly be. I'm pretty impressed. So did you dislike popular music at that age? I mean, were you, because I know you're into popular music, but, very specific ones. You don't like it generally. Most of it's crap.
Probably sort of all at the same time, some degree. I mean, I kind of definitely went more towards rock music when I got to kind of the age of 13, 14, whatever.
What rock would that have been?
So I guess at that point I was discovering people like The Fall and Sonic Youth and etc., and then working back from that towards the kind of no wave stuff. And yeah, I mean, kind of avant rock, loosely, however you
alt.
I'm sure I'm saying all the tastes that I'm happy to admit to. I'm sure I'm subconsciously censoring a lot of stuff I'd be more ashamed of.
But hang on. We don't endorse censorship here. What about some of the classic hard rock? Were you older when you got into that?
What would you call classic hard rock?
Rolling Stones, AC/DC.
Weasel's latest obsession, The Who, and he is obsessed. Led Zeppelin.
Don't throw him under the bus.
I'm not. I'm enjoying it myself. Glam rock, even.
So, I mean, most of that would be kind of stuff that was also in my parents' record collection. So I was familiar with it. I enjoyed it. And yeah, I would say as a kid, I listened to a lot of that. Yeah, I was into all that kind of stuff. But then when it came to sort of trying to find my own thing, that was already that was familiar to me. It wasn't that I didn't like it. It was just that there wasn't something to discover
or expand upon. I love the vision. Tell me if I'm fantasizing of you as a 10-year-old in a cardigan dancing around the house to the New York Dolls. I mean, that's just my fantasy. I'm sorry, Alex, not to demean you in any way. Actually, I'm only saying that because when I was 12 years old, I was running away to see the New York Dolls. I was just trying to put you in my picture.
You'd probably have to skip forward to like 10, probably more when I was 20. I was dancing around in a club.
And you were in Oxford at the time, which was
that
was a different. So did you tour at all with Derek Bailey at the age of 12? I mean, were you jumping around the country, or is it just all local gigs?
Well, not local to me, because I was nowhere. I mean, where I was, there was nothing going on there. So I mean, the closest local place would have been Nottingham. But yeah, we did some things in London, and then a few things out of the country. Like I think 1987, there was something in Den Haag. It's all a little blurry, but yeah, I mean, he would put me on things.
I mean, I don't want to dig too deep here, but your parents are like, okay, little boy, go run off with this old man touring. They were totally okay with that.
Well, I mean, most of these gigs were one-offs, and they would kind of tag along. I mean, yeah. I mean,
okay. Well, we know London, or England, and how that can go. So,
geez, I'm so glad my parents didn't tag along when I was 13 or 14, going backstage at rock concerts. That wouldn't have worked very well.
So when you started getting into rock, is that when you said, "Hey, I want to learn the electric guitar"? I mean, because you started with clarinet, correct?
Well, I started with piano, but then moved to clarinet.
Started with piano, okay, and then clarinet, and then you're like, okay, I'm kind of liking this rock and roll. Maybe I pick up the guitar. Or did you pick up a guitar later?
No, I picked up a guitar. I mean, I think what I remember is that there was a guitar around the house, which was sort of like a kind of sort of cheap nylon strung kind of thing. I mean, I presume this had been sort of got with me in mind, but I mean, yeah, sort of the kind of
a toy.
Yeah, but it was something that you could do stuff with, and so I actually can trace a lot of. At the same time, I was kind of being classically trained on clarinet and piano or whatever. The guitar was something that I could kind of use in a much more intuitive kind of way, sort of detuning it, finding things around the house to use as a slide, dropping kind of little microphones in the sound hole and that kind of thing. Even though I was kind of doing that more when I was sort of interest in free jazz, I guess then when I moved more towards rock music and wanted to get an electric, it still sort of meant that kind of homemade experimentation approach to the guitar was what was informing it. And so
what was the first guitar you actually bought?
I don't know what the brand was. I mean, I'm not sure it even
Do you have
it was black, it had one pickup, it had
okay,
no tremolo bar. That's as far as I can get you.
Let me rephrase it. What's your favorite guitar to play now? Because I mean, with the guitar, you are creating quite otherworldly sounds with tuning or harmonics. But what now is your preferred guitar instrument and amp? I mean, I'm curious about that.
Well, I mean, one thing I'd say is I'm not much of a kind of a gearhead in terms of musical instruments. I'm sort of I'm not too obsessed with them, but recently I guess I made a bit of a change in that I wanted to start doing some sort of solo guitar stuff, and I realized that the guitar that I'd been playing for a long time, which was a kind of metalish shredders kind of guitar, just wasn't going to sound, it didn't have enough character to sustain kind of long periods of unaccompanied guitar. So I needed to get something with just a little bit more character to it, and so I ended up with this this thing that went along the last whose tremolo bar is now fixed, I'm glad to say.
The Albert Lee, is that what it is? The Albert Lee Music Man?
I specialize in getting signature models of people who I don't actually own any of their albums, because the one I had before was a Page Hamilton signature model, and I've never owned a Helmet album or anything. It's nice. It's kind of wasn't too expensive. Action's nice. I can,
fits your crotch well.
Yeah.
Well, this is a little side story. It was the first Lutenbachers tour that you were on with me, and I ended up with a whammy bar in my bass case, and I was like, "What? I don't have a whammy bar. Why did this thing show up?" And I was asking around, and no one knew. And then I think I posted on social media, and you're like, "Oh, that would be mine."
Yeah.
I was already back in the States, and you're still in England, but I guess the stage crew just like threw it in my bag. I swear I didn't steal it from you, Alex. I swear.
I kind of I seem to remember losing things on those tours was not something that any of us was a stranger to.
Losing our minds actually was part of it.
Retrovirus occasionally likes to prank items in people's bags.
Oh boy.
I won't go any further. But this goes back to the only real job I ever had as a hotel maid when I was 13, 14, lying about my age to get enough money to go to New York. And it was a hotel maid, and I would put things in pilots' suitcases and also steal a lot of things from them. But
that's so funny.
Joints, use cigarettes. I didn't even smoke. Use cigarettes, and just for a little excitement between having sex with the engineer in the bathroom after I'd cleaned it, had to clean it again. Just saying.
God.
I don't know about the whammy bar. I wasn't there. Just saying.
Well, I think planting things is much more funny and creative than stealing things. I mean,
probably Pilot's Day as well. They were probably glad to find these things.
So Alex, if you were going to plant something in my bag, just I want you to think about that. You don't even have to answer. I'm just saying. Carry on, Tim.
Well, I don't want to digress. I have a quick story. I remember I signed up for one of those stupid record tape clubs, and every time you didn't mail in the coupon, they would send you some random shit record and charge you for it. And I was pretty good about it, but every now and then I slipped up, and then I would end up with some really just, I don't know what it would be, like Michael Bolton or something. And I was like, what do I do with this? And that's what I always do. I always plant it in my friend's record collection. So then when someone comes over, like, why do you have a Michael Bolton record? That kind of stuff.
Alex, what's one of the records that you most often, or pieces of music that you most often go back to? Like, there's something you just occasionally, I have to hear that.
There's a number kind of on the sort of free jazz sides that I guess there's the title track of John Coltrane's Expression would be one. Title track of Cecil Taylor's Winged Serpent would be one. But then on kind of more rock things, I mean, I've always been a Dylan fan. There's probably tons of Dylan I could name for that. I would have to say Hole by Scraping Fetus Off the Wheel would be one of them. I've listened to that album, a lot of times.
Unexpected.
Oh no, I'm a massive fan of Mr. Thirlwell, and when I've bumped into him since, I've always hoped that he doesn't remember the first time that I met him when I made kind of a drunken exhibition of myself. But
he's very forgiving.
Excellent.
Well, now, I don't know. I run into this sometimes. Is there ever been music where you just really couldn't stand it, and then years later you almost challenged your gut reaction why you hated it so much and found something to like about it, or you dive in, maybe like's not even the right word, it's just like you end up becoming more fascinated, and where before it was like a repellent to your ears? Did you ever have that experience?
It sounds familiar, but I'm now not thinking what it would be. While I percolate, name what that would be for you, Tim, that you've had that experience with.
Oh, well, I think you've heard my answers to this. I mean, I have a equal love and hate relationship with a lot of music. And so I can honestly say, well, all right, off the top of my head, because I listen to radio in my car, I always hated Elton John. And now I'll listen to it. I was like, well, you know what? Those productions are pretty insane. But I still can't conclude that I like them.
I want to jump in about Elton John for 1 minute, because he's so outrageous and ridiculous, but his songs, side by side, the top 40 hits, they have no relation to the previous ones. And I have to say, leave on any song that says the New York Times says God is dead and is a top 40 hit. I gotta love it. His songs side by side make no sense. This is, I guess, the difference between what singer-songwriters were. And also, I love the fact that he was a drug-addled slut of the highest order and just a huge weirdo. Most of his music unlistenable, but I did watch the movie about him. I mean, you gotta love anybody that the story is they were snorting lines of coke as long as a hallway with Princess Margaret. I mean, good on you, kid.
Alex, you'll have to interview me on your podcast, because Lydia's been over my house. I play so much bad music. It's really people get annoyed with it, because I've had a phase in the last 10 years where I'm into musical sociopaths. Which I believe that if you don't care about music, actually it liberates you to making a lot of money, for instance, in music. So there's a lot of producers who are kind of just like nuts. They force it on society. It's really strange. Well, you could even say David Gevin's a musical sociopath by forcing things like the Eagles on society. I mean, like, no one asked for that, right? But he was such a driven person. He made sure everyone heard it.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure if I came to your place and you did your absolute worst, you couldn't play anything that either of us disliked as much as Pinkerton. So I think Weasel Walter.
Oh, yes, we agree on that.
We'll definitely beat on that one.
We agree on this. All right,
let's go back I have to jump in.
Oh, yes.
Alex, I've been to Tim's house a few times. He sees a certain look on my face, which means if you don't change this fucking atrocious record, somebody's going to get in pain. And he immediately puts on James Brown.
I usually do. We don't want blood in the house.
I always clean up my own mess. But anyway, I'm just saying.
Well, James Brown's the go-to. He always said, I want to be a band leader for a band that can play any event, whether it's a birthday party, a dance hall, the White House. His band can just play anywhere. And it's kind of true. You put on James Brown.
What's not to love? What's not to love?
Yeah. Yes.
Are you funky, Alex? Do you have any funk in that white boy's body?
I don't think anyone who saw me try to dance to anything would think that I did. But I think, to listen to play, I think I can fake it now and again.
Is there a funk guitar player that you actually like? Or Eddie Hazel, Blackbird McDowell, Phelps Collins? I don't know.
Eddie Hazel. I mean, did he really play the funk stuff on the?
He plays more
lead shredding.
No, you're right. He was more the rock lead, post Hendrix guy. Phelps Collins. That's Bootsy's older brother who got him the James Brown gig. Right. Bootsy was like 14 when he played Sex Machine, and Phelps' older brother was already on the road with him and said, "You got to hire my brother." And Bootsy had a crappy Sears guitar with bass strings on it, and James Brown's like, "Well, you got to play a real bass," and he bought him a Fender bass, and the rest.
At 14, I was a sex machine. I just still am. Alex, any metal music you came to really like? I mean, whether it's death metal, black metal, heavy metal, just
glam metal.
Later, I mean, basically, there was a period maybe 10 or 15 years ago when I realized I'd always kind of had like 2 or 3 metal albums that I kind of thought was all I needed. So,
which ones?
Rain and Blood, From Enslavement to Obliteration, one of the Carcass ones. Probably.
Well, that's more grindcore.
Yeah,
come on.
Okay, yeah.
I'm teasing you.
And I would always have said at the time, yeah, I like metal. And at a certain point, I realized that I was being like someone who said, yeah, I like jazz. I really like that album, Kind of Blue, or whatever. And so I thought I have to change. I have to sort of go deep and sort of not just have these 3 albums, which I think is all I need. And so that I sort of went through a big phase 10 or 15 years ago.
Well, I want to know what that phase turned into. And look, I think everybody goes through phases of music, of course, because as you mature, different moods, different vibrations, you need different drugs you're on, different people you're with, different times of day or night. I know very little about metal. I think it's pretty funny and hilarious. I always think the singing is ridiculous. I love it when metal guitar players say they like my guitar playing in Teenage Jesus. That's the biggest laugh I've ever had. But okay, and it's not my favorite topic, but I want to know a little bit more about metal. And then I want you to reveal, because look, a lot of people don't know or haven't gone, especially from the age of 8 further, into some of these, like Albert Eiler, or these deeper out jazz things that have really inspired you to take music further as you do.
Okay, so we're on metal first. What was the question about metal? I forgot.
Just when you dug deeper after your first 3 albums, when you really dug deep, was there something that really you went, oh yeah, that's it?
Well, I guess obviously on the more experimental side of it, the Obscura by Gorguts, obviously. There's
so more death metal than black metal, maybe.
Yeah, there's a few black metal things I'm kind of into. Some of the Dark Throne stuff.
Right.
I think like Under a Funeral Moon is my favorite of the Dark Throne ones. Kind of more than.
Who's that by?
That's Dark Throne.
Dark Throne.
People tend to like the ones on either side more, but that's always been the one that spoke to me most.
Well, early Florida death metal, like Deicide and Morbid Angel and all that stuff.
I mean, Morbid Angel was one that I was kind of into a bit earlier. A friend of mine had Altars of Madness and Blessed Are the Sick, and I kind of used to listen to those around his house quite a lot.
Would you ever want to play that kind of shit? Just for fun?
Yeah, I mean, I can sit and kind of enjoy trying to learn those techniques, but I would never think of doing it in public. I kind of feel like,
well, you're Alex, you're not a metalhead, and metalheads can smell it a mile away.
Alex, I've seen, not experienced, but seen. You could say experienced. Your fingering technique. It's pretty incredible, my friend.
Thank you, Lydia.
Well, I want to move on, but the last thing I'll say about death metal, or about metal in general, I have a theory that, and tell me what you think, Alex. I feel like metal is the most resilient of the sub-rock genres because it's conservative by nature. It evolves so slowly, and it's democratic. It doesn't evolve until metalheads agree that it's evolved. You can't like come out and say, hey, this is the most experimental thing. They'll be like, we're going to kill you. But then suddenly something just really jumps way the fuck up, and it's like they've moved on to the next thing. But it's a very slow evolution where punk and all this other stuff just kind of it spurts up and it's done and just like move on.
I guess so. I mean, seems like, I mean, it's kind of like a really narrow church and a really broad church at the same time. It's sort of like you can kind of, if it's presented in the right way, you can kind of get away with anything in it. But as you say, if it's presented in the wrong way, it'll be dismissed out of hand. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing that it's still a genre that there's things coming out.
Wait, first of all, it's a genre of many genres. Second of all, what defines it, no matter whether it's grind, death, black, heavy, rock, glam, is that the intensity is incredible. The technique is usually masterful, even if you hate it. The singing is usually shitty. Can't necessarily ever hear the fucking lyrics, which are usually ridiculous. You don't want to anyway. But it's really teenage boy music, and I find it that it's a music that can really relieve a lot of frustration. And I think it's almost like pornography in a way that, for the most part, good pornography or pornography, when you discover it at the right age, it relieves a lot of frustrations that are going through somebody with too much testosterone. That's the beauty of metal. We can get into the beauty of out jazz in our next session in a few minutes.
So you end up going to Oxford, which is, of course, it's like the Harvard of the UK. I guess Oxford and Cambridge is like the UK Yale rival. And you're into all this obscure music. How the fuck did you avoid fights in the UK? Because every time I go there, and they, last call, everyone's punching each other's faces in. Did you somehow manage around some of the brutal elements of male culture in the UK?
I'm sure in Oxford there are places you can go to find that, but Oxford's a pretty genteel kind of place. I did get headbutted in a pub once, but
oh God.
Were they trying to steal your cardigan?
I can't. What was it about? I mean, the guy didn't have a very good aim, thankfully. But yeah, I don't know. Where have you almost got into fights in the UK?
Everywhere.
Well, yeah. It seems like they say the bars close early. Mm-hmm. They're like, last call. Everyone orders 5 fucking whiskeys, guzzle it down, and next thing you have these like Chub Scout girls in their spandex puking on themselves, eating candy bars, and the guys are beating each other's fucking faces in the street, and there's vomit everywhere.
Tim, Alex, excuse me, I'm just going to speak for him for a minute. He seems much more like a lover than a fighter.
All right, so Alex, so you go to Oxford, you're studying music there. Did you get a big gig right out of school, or were you just kind of just making your projects and then things kind of slowly came together? Was there a break that you can remember that kind of helped launch you into the international festivals and all that stuff?
I mean, I guess to a certain extent, maybe a couple of those things had maybe even happened with Derek even before I went to Oxford. But
right.
And the nice thing about moving to Oxford, the town, is that I already knew people on the improv scene there, like Pat Thomas and whoever. So I was connected with music outside of what I was studying, which was a lifesaver, really. Yeah. But I guess the first 2 kind of big tours that I did were around 97. One, a kind of 2-week thing with Eugene Chadbourne.
Oh, right.
And then I think the same year, a kind of tour around the UK with Butch Morris. And those were both interesting, pretty different experiences, as anyone who knows Eugene Chadbourne and Butch Morris.
Oh, yes.
Respect. But yeah, I'd say those were the 2 where I kind of got a taste of touring and maybe made more connections. Yeah, those would be the ones, I guess.
We met first at the Wells Unlimited Festival in Austria. What year was that? Do you know?
2010, I think.
Was it 2010? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and you were playing with. I
was playing with Steve Noble and John Edwards.
That's right. That's right.
New, which still exists. Yeah, I mean has to be said. A lot of the bands that I've been in, they're more sort of a gig here, a gig there, rather than kind of long tours. That's definitely one like that. Even something like This Is Not This Heat, I think the most we ever did was kind of like a stretch of.
And for the listeners, This Is Not This Heat was the reunion version of This Heat, which has a big cult following. And those multiple tours. Those were extremely popular. I mean, I saw you were playing large rooms. They were sold out all over the world. It was really
people were into it. People were very excited to see a version of that band again, and they seemed to feel that we did justice to it. So that was great. But I mean, as I say, even that band, I think the most consecutive gigs we did were like 7 or something. It didn't. So
is that one of the longest tours you've ever been on? What is one of the longest? I want to know about your life on the road for a minute. Like, what's one of the longest tours you've ever been on?
I think the longest tour I've been on is the last Lutenbachers.
Weasel Walter, Flying Lutenbachers. How many shows was that? 20?
I think it was 17, the last one. Sounds kind of right. Yeah, it's sort of the opportunities to kind of real long tours hasn't really kind of.
Do you enjoy that? I mean, of course you like playing live, but Do you find it more interesting to be on a longer tour or doing these catch as catch can gigs? I mean, that gets frustrating because is there ever enough?
It does. I mean, I have to say that the Lutenbachers tours I absolutely loved. It was, a great experience. And I mean, in a way, for that kind of music, the longer the better, because Tim would say, it just gets more insane each night.
It was getting more insane, and we were kind of really destroying it by the end. But then until we ended up destroying ourselves, we were pretty fried by the end. But.
Alex, what's the most destructive thing about being on a long-term tour for you? Which you're not an old hand at, because it seems like the Flying Lutenbacher 17 shows. That's your maximum, but what was the most kind of physically devastating aspect of that besides having to deal with Tim Dahl and Weasel Walter?
Well, unfortunately, the answer to that is kind of not very exciting and sort of depressing, which is just getting ill. I didn't get as ill as Weasel was in a sort of terrible state on that tour, and he just powered through it, despite the fact that he had the coronavirus before anyone did.
Yeah, maybe he had coronavirus.
I wouldn't be surprised. He had something nasty.
Yeah.
But,
always ahead of everybody else, of course, naturally.
But I mean, it's besides that, and just the typical much booze, not so much sleep, other things to keep the drinking and not sleeping going.
Oh boy! I mean, for the listeners who did not check out that tour, if I may compliment you, I mean, Alex came very prepared. He was playing guitar and was really killing it every night. And it was kind of, not to go back to metal and glam metal, like Motley Crue, but I mean, not only were we playing like this free jazz noise rock, we were just like animals up there on stage every night. And it's
heavy shit, the Lutenbachers, in whatever form it takes. It's heavy shit. And you got a shredder. You got some shredders up there. It's going to happen.
What Weasel hopes it's going to be is that it's going to be as musically intricate and
intense
on a high level as sort of the most sort of shredding out jazz, but not delivered in an at all studious way, delivered like in the most sort of brutal punk way you can have. And that's where I like to be. So
must be fun. So Alex, with all of these releases that you put out, year after year, I mean, is it frustrating that there's more releases than there are shows for you to perform? I mean, for instance, a lot of the recordings I originally did, or a lot of the bands I had, or I would make recordings, but I wouldn't tour a lot of it. This is why I love Retroviruses, because a lot of the music I could never bring to the stage at the time. Not only do we reinvigorate, but I can put it out there. But when I was recording, the main point was documenting, having a band. It toured or it didn't tour. Sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't. But the amount of things that you release, is there frustration in that, or are some things just meant to be a release and they don't have to be performed live?
Kind of a bit of both. I mean, there's definitely bands I've been in which put out 2 albums and have maybe done 3 or 4 gigs. And in some cases, it is frustrating. But with some, it's more frustrating with the things where there's kind of a composed element, or there's kind of a feeling that it's not so much that I necessarily want to get out and sell the album, but just a feeling that maybe we'd have brought it somewhere else if we'd had the chance to go on the road. But with a lot of the improvised projects, this is one of the things that I kind of wonder when you were saying how long a tour I've been on. I kind of wonder what a long tour with a free improvising group would really be like. I know that, a lot of them did that in the 70s or whatever, but I wonder, obviously, it, didn't seemingly hurt bands like, the kind of Brotsman, Benning, Van Hove trio or whatever. But For free improvised music, should you be going out and playing 60 gigs in a row?
No,
I mean, rock music,
absolutely.
I don't know.
No.
With free improv, it's kind of like you do hit these moments like, is this getting stale? And if you push yourself, you stumble across reinvention again, which actually, so there are peaks and valleys. But even with through composed music, like if I'm touring with Retrovirus, where you're playing the same songs, you can hit those moments, and then you have rediscovery of these things that you've played a million times too. Touring extensively, there's solutions to these things. I don't know how like the mega arena guys do it like 9 months in a row, and especially when there's a lot of backing tracks and their earpieces, and like, I mean, does that get? Which makes me want to ask you this, Alex. So if you came into music almost from the experimental side, and you said you learned more traditional techniques a little bit later, say in the guitar. So you're, in a weird way, you were kind of just like, correct me if I'm wrong, more of an artist and then a hired gun eventually, as opposed to like a hired gun that maybe evolved into an artist. Would there be any huge pop gigs if they're offered to you and the money was just through the fucking roof that you just, as an artist, say like, I just can't do that. So say if Taylor Swift came to you and it's like $7,000 a week, 15 fucking months, and I mean that's what that shit goes like.
All right, let me butt in here for a minute. Is there anyone who is dreadfully commercial that you could even imagine wanting the gig for? Because it is more than the money when you're our type of people, because money is not going to afford the drag on our soul and on our creative time and on what we want to do generally, to just be sucking somebody's left nut for $7,000 a week. Is there anybody that you would actually like to tour with if the possibility, I can't even think of it, came up, that was, far more commercial than you will ever be?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I do tour with people who are far more commercial than I would ever be. I do that.
But I'm talking commercial. I know, yes, you do, but I'm talking like mainstream.
Top 40, yeah.
Can't even think of it. Ugh. I would love to hear you with Nicki Minaj, just because, I mean, you'd lose your mind after watching that ass in motion probably after one night. I know I would.
That's true. I mean, but does she even use a band?
Doesn't need one.
A lot of times, actually, the contemporary R&B and hip hop megastars, there's a lot of backing tracks, but they hire a lot of these gospel shredders. I was to show my mind, I checked out a live 15 years ago Christina Aguilera concert on YouTube, and I was like, this is like pop prog. The fucking drummer, everyone's going absolutely nuts, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, on the airplanes, I'll check out other live concerts, and they're usually what you would expect, often worse. That one was actually not that bad.
Okay,
totally
Alex, any guilty female pop star pleasures?
Ooh, here we go.
Guilty female pop star pleasures.
I'm sorry.
He'll get it.
I can't see where your hands are, and that's okay. I'm not a pop star, Alex.
Okay, so.
You don't have to answer that.
You're
gonna have to. I'll email it after the show.
Okay. All right. Maybe I should ask you if there's any male pop stars.
Ooh.
Yeah, I seize up with these things. But,
what was the last giant concert you've gone to? Like there's more than 6,000-7,000 people.
Never.
I don't have the money to go to these shows.
A good answer.
That's the thing.
Yeah, why would you? Exactly. The experiences and those big things stink usually, I always find.
I can't stand being in any room with more than 50 or 100 people. Even 100 stretches the boundaries of my acceptance. I mean, hence why I'm so happy with my own career. I mean, there's 100 people usually at the show. I'm very happy with those 100.
Lydia, you did tell me a story when Nels invited you to a Wilco show, and you were furious at him. In fact, you told him never to fucking dream of bringing you to something like that again. You were clearly mad.
Why would I want to see the worst sounding band I've ever heard in my life, bar none? I don't get it. Well, all right, enough said about that. Okay, so Alex, what in lockdown, what are you hoping to accomplish next, or what are you putting out next? I mean, you're very prolific. So you've been doing, of course, I can imagine you're doing some composition or recording. Do you record at home? Where do you usually record? Do you have a home recording studio like I have my garage band?
Yeah, I can do stuff here. I mean, part of the way I've been able to be prolific is by working out how to do stuff for very little money. And so, yeah, I'm used to recording at home, or if I don't record at home, I kind of go to cheap rehearsal studios, record the stuff myself. So
people think that when we've been so prolific or we've been doing music for so long that we must be banking it, but they have no idea how difficult it is to be, as I call it, DIM, do it myself, or DIY, do it ourselves. People think, oh, you must be. No, it's not that we have to work that much to make the money. First of all, we have to work that much or we go insane. But second of all, it doesn't matter. People always think if you have a profile, if you've worked with these people that are so much more successful than we are, but it's not true. They have no idea when you're dealing with music that is so specific, that is so alternative, that is so intense, and in a way so personal, just how poor we can all be. And I'm not crying the blues about that. I'm just saying that's reality. That's why I discourage anybody from ever going into music. As Derek Bailey said to you when you were 12, hey, kid, don't think you're going to make any music from this shit. And I have to say, that's probably the best thing he ever said. Because don't think you're going to make any money from music or art or film or photography or writing, because you have to do it because you fucking love it. You have to do it because you're driven to do it. And there might not be a payday at the end of it. And the only payday is knowing that if you didn't do it, you would have imploded.
Yeah, that ties up with the previous thing to do with what kind of music would I do for money. As much as I could do, which would not stop me from doing my own stuff. And so that's it. You if you can stand to get a regular day job, you do. If you can't stand to do that, but you can make other money from doing music, you do it that way. If you have other ways of making money, whatever you need to do, and then you find the cheapest way to do the music that you need to do, and you get it done.
Have you had many day jobs in your adult life? I haven't, but then I'm a better hustler than most.
I avoided it for the most part, but there was
good man.
There was a kind of period where I was working at this kind of online bookstore, which kind of it was run by friends, and I think like kind of as a business thing, it was sort of a disaster, but it was nice in that they kind of they employed all the
weirdos
and everyone else who just needed a job. So I worked there, James worked there. That was the closest to a straight job, but it was a straight job run by non-straight people.
What are some of your favorite books? Some of your favorite authors?
Okay, I guess my three favorite authors would probably be Beckett, Celine, and Jim Thompson.
I love you more with everything you say, my friend. I found a copy of The Killer Inside Me on my steps a couple of months ago. And I love that film as well. And I love that book. And I love Jim Thompson. Absolutely. Do you write anything with words, Alex? Do you write words? Do you write any
songs, right?
Well,
yeah.
That's it. I would say, I mean, this seems like I'm not answering the question that you've asked, but
that's fine.
Answer it. I would say that despite the fact that we've talked a lot about what I did musically when I was young, I actually think of myself as a really kind of late developer musically. I had some skills and some ideas and some ability to collaborate and did some stuff that I'm still proud of, but there were certain kind of things about what you need to do to make art your own, which I didn't grasp till a lot later. And where this is coming round to is that the way I taught myself to do that was by writing songs. I went kind of after a period of sort of not a kind of bleak period where I didn't know what I was doing at all in the kind of early 2000s. I started writing songs, and through doing that and through writing words, that's how I learned to relate material to expression and to the idea that something only means something if it has some kind of psychological truth behind it. I think it took me a long time to work that out, And I had to work it out through words and using words, therefore, as the basis for music. And then from that, then I was able to apply that to music just as it is. And now I haven't written words or songs in maybe 10 years, but
when they're needed, they're there. And if you need somebody to write some words for you, I'm right here, even if they're only liner notes, just saying.
That you will be definitely taken up on that.
Well, I like that tone of voice when you use that on me. You will be taken up on that. Right. I'm here for the taking. I never say that to any man, but since we're a safe 3,000 something miles away and you aren't afraid of me with a straight razor near your face, I can say that to you honestly, Alex. And thank you so much, Alex, for all of your talent, your inspiration, your improvisation, your unique fingering technique. And we'll get to that here later.
Your dedication and your commitment is
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.